Hey, fellow superhero cinephiles. Did you know that almost 30% of adults say they haven't read a book in the past year? The primary reason why is a lack of time. Well, Audible's here to help with the gift of found time. Thanks to Audible, you can listen to audiobooks like Marvel Comics, The Untold Story, or Slugfest, inside the epic 50-year battle between Marvel and DC. Read up on the history of superheroes in comics and movies with Grant Morrison's Super Gods. You can also check out Vanguard, my original superhero novel series, or try The Vril Agenda or The Adventures of Fortune McCall, both of which were written by our dearly departed host emeritus, Derek Ferguson. Whatever you're looking for, Audible has thousands of titles that you can consume while commuting, exercising, cooking, or just relaxing at home. And not only audiobooks, an Audible membership also gives you access to tons of content like podcasts, theatrical performances, and exclusive Audible originals that you won't find anywhere else. To give you a taste of what you can get, Audible has partnered with this show to provide listeners with a free 30-day trial. All you have to do is go to audibletrial.com/supercinemapod, and with your free trial, you get one free audiobook and 2 free Audible originals. In fact, you get to keep those titles even if you cancel before the trial is over. So what are you waiting for? Head on over to audibletrial.com/supercinemapod and start your free trial today.
By the time I was 14, I could barely remember what life was like before she died. That's how old I was when he sent me on my first assignment. I was willing to do anything he wanted. If he asked me to burn the world down, I would have asked him.
Beef or vegetarian? Roll out of the chicken, so I can only offer you beef or vegetarian.
Vegetarian would be great.
Yeah, same.
Okay, thank you. So,
Oh, we're out of the vegetarian too. Now we only have beef.
beef, because that's all you have, right?
Okay, you'll have the beef.
Yes,
And
and the beef.
2 beefs.
Did you go through with it?
I knew that I couldn't go back to him, so I just ran. I know this is a lot to dump on you.
I'm sorry about your mom.
I should also probably mention that my name's not technically Sean.
What is it?
It's Shang-Chi.
Shang-Chi.
No, Shang-Chi.
Shang-Chi.
Shang.
Shan.
Shang.
Shan.
S-H-A-N-G. Shang.
Shang?
Yeah.
You changed your name from Shang to Sean?
Yeah, I don't...
I wonder
Yeah.
how your father found
Okay,
you.
I was 15 years old, all right?
What is your name change logic? You going into hiding and your name is Michael, you want to change it to Michael.
That's not what happened.
It's like, hi, my name's Gina. I'm gonna go into hiding. My new name's Gina. Yeah, okay. Oh, yeah, you can hear me.
Welcome back to the Superhero Cinephiles podcast. It's been a little over a month since the last time we've had a new episode, but I'm finally back in Japan, finally out of quarantine, and ready to talk about some superhero movies with a brand new guest, and that is Jessica Fong. Jessica, how you doing today?
Hi, I'm good. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, thanks for coming on. So our association, online association began, and I'm an old man, so you can forgive me if I'm misremembering things, but I believe it was on some comic book thread on Facebook where people were complaining about Iceman being gay, and you and I kind of jumped in that, and we're talking about how this is actually not that surprising for that character. And then after that, we kind of struck up a friendship from there.
That's right. Oh my God, that was so long ago.
Mm-hmm. And believe it or not, those arguments are still going on. I saw one.
I'm not surprised by that.
Yeah. But before we get started into today's movie, why don't you tell people a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I'm Jessica. I live in the Bay Area in California. Um, I'm not a huge comics nerd, but like I've always enjoyed, you know, anything nerdy, anything geeky.
Mhm.
And right now I actually write for Comic Book Resources.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, CBR. Although I don't write for the comics section. I write for the TV and movies, and sometimes I dabble a bit in the gaming and anime sections.
Mhm.
And yeah, I'm Chinese American. My parents are from Hong Kong. They immigrated here in the 70s when they were young adults. So, you know, I grew up watching Jackie Chan films, of course, wuxia films, all kinds of like Hong Kong cinema. Like they really brought that Hong Kong pop culture like history with them and like instilled that, you know, into me and my brother's lives as we were growing up.
Mhm.
Oh yeah, like I'm just really excited to be here today to talk about Shang-Chi because I was so emotional the first time I saw it. I mean, you know my post on Facebook.
Yeah, that was why I was really keen to get you on to talk about it based on, because I know tons of people who are familiar with the Shang-Chi and the Master Kung Fu comic books, and I've read some of them myself. So, but I figured like I could bring some of that background here, but having the perspective of someone who's coming at it from a completely different angle, I thought would be make for a lot more interesting discussion. Because we
Yeah.
do a lot of the, you know, what it was like in the comic stuff here already, and so this brings a very kind of fresh perspective to it, I think.
I will do my best.
One thing you said in there, so you mentioned that you write for CBR. We've actually got another guest on here who's come on once before, and he's actually going to be on the next episode. Stacy Dukes. He also writes for CBR on occasion, I believe.
Oh, cool. Yeah, there are a ton of us, so I don't know.
Yeah.
That's really awesome.
So how did you, I mean, you said you like nerdy stuff. How did you what was kind of your gateway drug into it? How did you get into that kind of stuff?
Well, aside from the usual, you know, fairy tale, you know, when you're like a little kid, I would say probably Harry Potter was the first like big obsession that I had. Just, you know, as a young kid, and like that kind of brought me into the whole world of YA fantasy. And of course, I always loved watching like Star Wars and just anything that was like fantastical or that kind of pushed the boundaries of possibility. I was just always into that. Like I had a fantasy life as a kid. And yeah.
Was there anything superhero specific that kind of got you into it?
Oh, I definitely watched a lot of the Saturday morning cartoons of like Spider-Man, you know, Batman. I was always drawn to the little bits of female representation that were in these like superhero stories like Poison Ivy and I just thought they were so cool and so powerful. And like I said, I'm not an expert, but like I definitely like grew up like soaked in that that kind of atmosphere of like superheroes. And when the Marvel Cinematic Universe started, I was really excited because I really wanted, you know, I had always wanted to get more deeply into the world of supers, and I thought it was really cool that this more unified take was going to be coming out. And you know, kind of streamlining it into one more comprehensible storyline. So I've really been enjoying the MCU. I know that there are issues, and I have my own issues with each of the different installments. Yeah.
I mean, we're big MCU fans over here, back from the beginning of this show, because and just like you, I got into it with like those pretty much those exact same cartoons, like Batman, Spider-Man, X-Men, of course, as well.
Oh yeah, X-Men for sure.
And when you mentioned female representation, that was one of the first things that came to my mind, because especially in the comic books, Claremont did a lot of stuff with that. I mean, there are lots of times when the female members actually outnumbered the male,
which I really loved. I mean, you look at other stories that you're exposed to as like a kid in the 90s, and you don't often see women just being unapologetically powerful.
Yeah.
And also complicated. Like you bring up X-Men, and I always think back to Jean Grey and the Phoenix Saga and Phoenix Saga. And I remember seeing that on TV as a kid and just being like, wow, like she's going, you know, she's dark, she's powerful, she's conflicted. Like I don't see things like this in other media. So
yeah, it was those shows. It was such a mature level of storytelling, especially compared to what we got in kids programming before that. Because I think I'm maybe a little bit older than you, and you know, I came in like the '80s, the late '80s and the '90s, and just looking back on it when you're a kid, you don't notice, but looking back on it now and seeing just like the big leap in storytelling and maturity from like Ninja Turtles to Batman was just amazing.
No, absolutely. Yeah. And that was definitely something that I noticed as a kid. And I was like, I remember thinking like, am I allowed to watch this? Like, really dark, like, wow.
Yeah.
Grateful for that.
So like you mentioned, today we're talking about Shang-Chi. And like you mentioned, you didn't have really you went in pretty much cold with this character, right? You had no familiarity with him before.
Yeah, like I had obviously heard the name because they'd been talking about the project for quite some time. I think I read the other day that like they'd had his name in their like slate of superheroes that they wanted to make films with the beginning of Marvel Studios. And I was always like interested because there aren't any Asian superheroes, like really, like he's the only one that I can think of off the top of my head, right? Like there's Iron, he's not Asian.
No, he's not Asian. I mean, there are some here and there, but they're very, very obscure. They tend to be very obscure characters. So like you've got Sunfire with the X-Men, and the whole Big Hero 6 crew. Those all came out of Marvel originally.
Oh God, I love Big Hero 6.
They're very different. You might not want to read the old comics because they're it's well intentioned, right? But it's very much written by white guys whose only image of Japan comes from movies and anime.
Right. Yeah.
So there's a lot of that kind of stuff in there. I mean, and I'd first encountered the characters here and there through comic reading over the years, but after moving to Japan is when I actually sat down and read those comics, and they first appeared in Alpha Flight, and then they had Sunfire and Big Hero 6. That was their first miniseries. And in that they introduced the whole crew, and one of them, you know, the word for in Japanese for egg is tamago, and they had one of the characters whose power was like she spins really fast and she kind of looks like an egg when she moves, so her name ended up being Gogo Tomago instead. Just like yeah. So just I didn't
realize that was the genesis of her
name. It's just little things like that, and it was just very, very stereotypical, almost offensively so. And so it's Disney made a lot of well understood changes when they did that.
I did end up looking a little bit into the changes that were made. Definitely think that they like made really good decisions with letting Asian American voices lead the way on
absolutely
how to reinterpret, you know, these characters, and that, like you said, were created in it with maybe with good intentions, but with ignorance.
I mean, and Claremont wrote one of the miniseries after they first appeared, and he's very much part of that too. Very well intentioned, but not as culturally sensitive as he could have been back in those days.
Yeah, and I mean, like that was in the 70s that when Shang-Chi was first right, and so that was around the same time that Hong Kong cinema were becoming popular here in the West, and of course we didn't have the internet back then, so it was a lot harder to get that direct cultural exchange. So this version is like coming over and being made into products, and there's like a lot of similarity there between Big Hero 6 and Shang-Chi.
And that's a really good transition you mentioned there, because Shang-Chi did start in the 70s. It was Steve Englehart who'd been a really progressive writer for his time. But again, looking back on it now, but one of the things he did was he had actually approached DC about doing a comic book version of Kung Fu, the TV series.
Oh,
Yeah, and because DC's parent company Warner Brothers owned the rights, but DC at the time they thought, oh, this is a fad, it's going to die out, so we're not going to commit the resources into doing a comic book. So then Englehart went over to Marvel and he suggested doing a Kung Fu series with all the, like you mentioned, all the Kung Fu stuff that was coming out at the time. And so that was kind of the start of Master of Kung Fu. And Marvel had two mandates for him. The first was that Shang-Chi had to be half white.
Oh my God.
which was pretty much ignored for the most part by most of the writers. And then the current writer, Gene, I'm blanking on his name right now, but he's an Asian American writer, and he just basically, after the movie, he just basically flat out came out and said no, his mother's actually Chinese. So
I love that.
But the other mandate Marvel had was because they had recently required the comic book rights to a very infamous character known as Fu Manchu. And so the other mandate was that you have to work Fu Manchu and those characters into the comic book. So Englehart had introduced Shang-Chi as the son of Fu Manchu, who was raised thinking his father was a good guy, and then raised in isolation, trained, and then sent out into the world on his first mission when he found out that no, actually your father's a piece of shit. And then he ends up joining up with MI6 and some of the other characters who originated, like Dennis Nayland Smith, who originated in the Fu Manchu books. And then the real classic run was Doug Moench was the writer and Paul Gulacy was the penciler. And basically from that point on, you've seen Enter the Dragon, I assume.
Yes.
Yeah, it's basically Enter the Dragon in the Marvel universe from that point on.
Right.
They even modeled him after Bruce Lee. Paul Gulacy took very heavy, because at first he looked like nothing like Bruce Lee. He had kind of like this mop top haircut. And then once Gulacy came on, he just pretty much drew him like Bruce Lee from that point going forward.
Right. Weren't they going to do a Shang-Chi with Bruce Lee at one point?
I don't know. I mean, I assume that was probably something they would have loved to do, but I don't know if there was ever actually anything in the works about that.
Right. I think they just wanted to do it, but they weren't able to make it happen.
Yeah, probably. And then, the Master of Kung Fu series eventually kind of died out. And then what happened is Marvel lost the rights to publishing Fu Manchu. So whenever Shang-Chi appeared after that point, they could never call his father Fu Manchu. So it was always just known as Shang-Chi's father or something like that.
Right.
Until finally Ed Brubaker took him up in Secret Avengers, and then he officially gave his father the name Zheng Zhu. And that was the character's name from that point forward.
Right. And then they gave him a new name for the movie.
Then they completely changed his name for the movie, which I thought was interesting. But they had and I was looking this up last night to figure out why they didn't just go with the Zheng Zhu name. Yeah. And but it turns out that the screenwriters had found like the name Wen Wu. Apparently, the characters in it, one means like one has something to do with military, and the other has to do with like service or something along those lines.
Oh yeah, that my Chinese is not the best, but it's plausible.
Yeah.
That they changed the characters in the rings as well.
Yes, the rings were changed because they wanted to avoid any comparisons to the Infinity Stones, because they felt the Mandarin's rings and the Infinity Stones were a little bit too similar. So they got the idea for these rings from another movie called The 36th Chamber of Xialing,
which I haven't seen, but
yes, I haven't seen it either.
Yeah, but the training bracelets are totally like a thing that you see in a lot of kung fu movies, where they're like weighted bracelets and they help with like developing strength as your drills.
And Marvel had done a lot. They were able to do a lot of cleanup with this movie, actually, which I thought was really interesting, because you've got Shang-Chi in the movie and you can't use Fu Manchu. And you know what? Honestly, you probably shouldn't.
Yeah.
So good on them for deciding not to do that. But so then you had the issue with, well, how do we handle Shang-Chi's father? And then they had another competing issue that kind of came up, and they found a good way to do kind of clean up with this, because earlier Marvel had introduced the Mandarin in Iron Man 3,
Right.
and the Ten Rings organization introduced in the first Iron Man movie, and fans were very upset with how the Mandarin turned out in Iron Man 3.
Oh yeah, I remember that. I was pretty upset too.
Yeah, I was too. Like I understood the criticisms of the character. He definitely has very complicated history, very racist overtones in his creation, but the more modern comics have definitely kind of eschewed all that. And like even in his more recent appearances, he's not even wearing like any like Chinese, Orientalist specific clothes or anything like that. He's very much just a guy in a suit with alien space technology, basically.
Right. Yeah. That yellow peril like origin of Fu Manchu is just really, really painful.
Yeah.
A lot of us Chinese Americans. Just that really caricatured portrayal, with like the wispy mustache and yeah. So yeah, I really loved how they cleaned that up in Shang-Chi. I mean, I thought it was really brilliant to bring Slattery back as sort of like to acknowledge like, yeah, we kind of messed up. And he's a different character, and there's actually a more like real person behind all of this. And like you said, I love how he's now just like a guy in a suit. Like that is, we're all in the modern world now. Like nobody in China.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Like we're not going around in our like cheap house and stuff, like ridiculous. So yeah, I think they did a really good job at like humanizing this character.
That was something I mentioned to my students here in Japan all the time when they ask about depictions of Japan, and I mentioned how like, well, a lot of times when they have comic books or something like that, you'll see women walking around in kimono, and I'm like, and nobody does that here.
Yeah, like that is a very specific like special occasion. Like we're just yeah. So I really like how they fixed that, and I really feel that bringing Tony Leung in was just genius.
Yeah.
I mean, that guy, he's incredible. Like, I don't know how much, have you seen Wong Kar-wai's films?
I've seen 2046, and I think I've seen some other ones too, but I definitely 2046.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, his films are amazing. I grew up watching a lot of his movies, especially and I'm blanking on the name, but the one that is more of a romantic comedy, and I don't think I'm blanking on the name right now, but Tony Leung is in that one, and he's like so emblematic of a certain spirit of Hong Kong youth, like disaffected youth.
I see.
It's just really cool seeing like his gravitas being brought to this movie, and Michelle Yeoh as well. Like it was like seeing childhood like kind of level up and bring their legendary status to this movie. So yeah, I got really emotional seeing Tony Leung as Wenwu, and his eye acting is incredible. I'm sure you know the internet discussions about that.
Yeah, and I came to Tony Leung from Hard Boiled. That was my introduction to him.
Yes.
And then obviously Infernal Affairs too, and 2046. So, and it was funny because a lot of the predictions I made about this movie actually seemed to come true, because when they had the issue with the Mandarin, and they had done after Iron Man 3, they had done this short film called All Hail the King. I'm not sure if you ever saw that.
Yes, I did actually. After Shang-Chi, I went back and watched that.
Yeah, and that was this great little. It does a little bit more about Trevor Slattery in prison, and Ben Kingsley is just having a ball doing that.
Yeah,
and you see him in like his failed NBC pilot Caged Heat.
I love it.
It's just so nice to see just this actor with such gravitas, Ben Kingsley, and just like having fun playing this, doing this, proving that he's got this skill for comedy that I don't think anyone ever imagined that he had that much comedic timing.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, he was such an unexpected like comic relief in the second half of the movie, and very needed, I think, because things get more heavy
as
the movie goes on, and he brings that lightness and that meta humor. That is very much needed.
and very much commenting on the failures of the past, like when he mentions, I did what now I realize to be a very unflattering portrait of your father.
Good stuff.
Mm-hmm. And but one of the great things about that was they had hinted that there was the real Mandarin out there at the end of that movie.
Right.
And I was, my feeling at that point was, I'm like, oh, this is awesome, but they're probably never going to do it because they're not going to be doing another Iron Man movie. So, but then, and my thought at the time was, well, you know what? If they want to do Shang-Chi at some point, this could be the perfect way. You have Shang-Chi as the son of the Mandarin instead of the son of Fu Manchu. And I even said to people in debates back about the Mandarin stuff, I'm like, if you get a really good actor like Tony Leung, he can make this actually work. And then both those things ended up happening.
You were psychic.
I was psychic, yeah.
That's impressive.
I mean, he was one of the names I threw out there because he's just one of those actors who's, he's got, like you mentioned, he's got such gravitas and just such presence that you could totally see him owning a role like this.
Yeah, absolutely. He's got like a Shakespearean, like classical type of vibe to him when you think of his reputation in Asian cinema.
Yes, yeah. And I loved what I knew he was going to kill it when they announced that he was going to be the Mandarin, but or I should probably switch over to saying Wenwu now, but
yeah.
But I knew he was going to kill it when they announced that he was going to be the character, but just I had never expected such a nuanced and layered performance that they gave and backstory they gave this guy.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, the range that he shows as Wenwu, like he's the ruthless warlord, he's the disappointed, like emotionally abusive father, and so like this love-struck guy with their mother, who the actress did such an amazing job playing her.
Yeah.
And that opening sequence, can I like rant for a second?
Go right ahead, yeah.
That opening sequence took my breath away. I mean, I was so blown away. I ended up seeing it twice in theaters because I was like, I'm in love with this movie. And both times I just loved the opening sequence so much. I mean, the fact that it's all in Mandarin is incredible. Like, it doesn't even feel like a Marvel film.
Yeah, it felt so much like and I'm not as familiar with wushu films as you are, but like for me it was very much like I got a very much like a Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon vibe from it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It definitely had that like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon vibe, and like that fairy tale kind of feeling. Like a very key element of wuxia is like having that sort of elevated magical element to it while still having the down to earth like fight choreography. Find, and they really, really nailed that. And I was just blown away.
And just mentioned the credit is the Fala Chen was the actress who played Ying Li.
That's right. Yes.
And in fact, because I read that Michelle Yeoh was in this movie, and for the first, like, because she's wearing the face covering at the beginning in there, so I'm like, I'm staring at her. I'm like, is that Michelle Yeoh? Did they do some de-aging stuff? And then I'm like, wait, no, that's not Michelle Yeoh. And I'm staring at her face every time she's on screen. I'm like, that's not her. I'm like, when's Michelle Yeoh going to come in this? And then she pops up in the second part.
Just when you think they've run out of like amazing surprises, they bring in the second act. Yeah, it's incredible. And like that's like another thing about this movie. Like we don't just get one Asian woman or Asian American woman, a whole spectrum, like a whole array of Asian women, of Chinese women. And it's incredible. Like I don't know how I almost can't put into words how it feels. It's like, you know, that people talk about feeling seen. Like I really felt seen by this movie in a way that I didn't think was possible in our current time of Hollywood and all that. Like very specifically, it felt Asian American to me.
Yes, there's please go into some of the stuff that specifically you were thinking about with that.
Yeah, just like starting off with this extended Mandarin wuxia sequence, it kind of, you know, reminded me of my upbringing, being told stories and like being exposed to these stories from our home countries, and, going into Shang-Chi's adult life in San Francisco. I mean, I live in the Bay Area, so first, like already freaking out, being like, oh my God, it's Chinatown. Like, this is where I grew up. Like, this is like where I went every like weekend to see my grandma. Like the apartment that Katie's family lives in is like a carbon copy of my grandma's apartment in Chinatown. Like emotional just seeing like the shoes outside the door and the multi-generational living where everybody's at the dinner table, at the breakfast table, they're having joke. And just the friendship and like the camaraderie between Katie and Shang-Chi, how they're kind of they understand like the burdens that each of them has, like in trying to live up to the ideals that their parents and their grandparents are asking of them, and just all those complexities, like the dynamics that they captured in that sequence that's just set in San Francisco. I mean, I really, really felt seen. Like,
yeah. And there's a lot of universality to that, because like the scene with the grandmother, it's there. I think there's this thing about immigrant grandmothers. I think they're like all very similar because
it's so true.
My grandmother's from Turkey, Greek via Turkey, and very much the same way, right? Always asking like, when are you and your best friend going to get married and all that, and just the different. And the way they put those different expectations, how Katie doesn't have a warlord terrorist as a parent, but she does have those other expectations from her parents, and the way they contrast those two it really just it gives that kind of grounding to the movie, and it gives like a real world parallel to what Shang's going through.
Yeah, they were so skillful in weaving in that theme through the whole movie. And like I was just rewatching it the other day, the scene at the breakfast table in Katie's apartment where they're talking about how moving on is an American concept. The kids are like, just like, move on. And that actually ends up being like the emotional like struggle at the heart of the movie, that Wenwu is unable to move on, that that concept doesn't exist for him.
And also Shang-Chi is trying to move on too much.
Yes. And finding that balance. That is such that's something I related to so much, of like trying to find the balance between these 2 or 3 different places that you don't quite belong in, but you do, or you should, and just not knowing like where you're supposed to stand in the middle of all of that.
Yeah, as children of immigrants, that's something that that's a struggle that we kind of experience. I mean, I experienced it to a lesser degree with my family. Both my parents were immigrants, but my mom came over when she was a baby, and my father came from England. But it's just like that we had much more of the Greek influence growing up because of my mom's family being so close by, and then just like as a kid, like being made fun of. Like I remember we had a culture day thing where I wore the classic like Greek costuming, and kids making fun of me because I had a skirt on it and that kind of stuff. And that kind of stuff, and just like and that kind of like running away from that side of your culture. And there was a lot of that in there that really spoke to me.
Oh yeah. I remember like as a kid, I would have friends like carpool with me home from school, and my mom would be playing her Cantonese pop, and I was so embarrassed. Like it would be like, I have to explain what this is, or like it's like a different language that like you don't normally hear, because most people think of Chinese, they think of Mandarin, so they don't think of Cantonese. So that already was like another layer of like, this is a weird new thing that I have to explain. Everyone was really cool about it, but I definitely felt like very conflicted. And I grew up in a very white area here in the suburbs, so it was just a different world. And that was something I really appreciated about the movie, was Katie's character. As character, she is like when John calls her an ABC, or he's like, I speak ABC. I laughed so hard because that is totally my experience growing up, like meeting kids who who are from China or from Taiwan, and having that kind of gap between us, even though we're the same age, and them being like, oh, you're an ABC, like you have an accent when you speak Chinese, like your Chinese is not that good. And me just feeling like I'm such a failure. Like I'm like, what am I? Like, I'm this weird hybrid creature and I don't really belong to any of these worlds. And it was just really cool to see a character like Katie on screen.
I did not catch that until later. I had seen somebody talking about it on, I think it was Reddit, and they had mentioned what that meant by, and I just assumed it was like, it was a joke, like Ronnie Chang just finding a different way to say I speak English.
Yeah.
And I think that's what a lot of people who don't have that experience assumed. So so I don't think you mentioned it in your description there, but what does ABC actually stand for?
So ABC is American Born Chinese. And yeah, it is a very specific term that, like you say, like the general audience probably wouldn't cotton onto that being a specific meaning. And yeah, like that's, it's a little bit derogatory, not like, more of like a teasing kind of vibe, like,
Right.
easy. Yeah, so that was very special, like having that term just be really casually tossed in there. And like, if you didn't get it, it was fine, like the movie on. But for people like me, it was like, oh, like we're here, like we've seen, and they get it. Yeah.
Another thing I really liked there are two things I really liked about Katie. One was just her general style. Like, I just love how Awkwafina is dressed and has like these really weird clothing combinations, and they don't try to like, Hollywood her eyes, however.
Yes.
It's just this very like, she's walking around with the fanny pack and the bright green pants.
I love it. Yeah. I was going to say the fanny pack was iconic.
But one other thing I really liked about it, and what I really appreciated, is the movie doesn't put any pressure to link Shang and Katie together romantically.
Yes.
And being as someone whose best friend is a woman, I really appreciated that aspect of it. Like being expressing that idea of, you can have, completely platonic relationships between straight men and women. It's okay.
Yes, absolutely. Their friendship was so warm and authentic and just very grounded feeling. And I definitely like, I was seeing like friendships I've had with other Asian American kids presented on the screen. And like I said, like the understanding, like the unspoken understanding between the two or however many of you, of the pressures that you're facing your generation, was just so well done. Also, in where they go to karaoke.
Yes. I saw people complaining about that scene, and I couldn't understand why. I mean, I thought that was such a wonderful scene. It was such a humanizing moment. And
that is such an Asian American thing. We love to go to karaoke. Like, we're boba and karaoke are like the things that we're like, we should be responsible. No, we're gonna go to karaoke. I can't believe people are complaining about that.
I think it was, I don't know, there are some people who just like to find things to nitpick about, but I thought that scene was amazing.
And then bringing it back at the end.
With Wong.
I
love what the MCU has done with Wong. It's how they've completely built him up as his own character, as opposed to how he originally started off being Doctor Strange's manservant, which is actually the term they used.
Oh, yikes.
Yeah. So I really like this different version. And now we find out I'm not sure if you saw No Way Home, but we find out in that he's actually the Sorcerer Supreme.
Oh, I actually haven't seen that yet.
Okay. So that's just, I won't say anything else about it.
Okay.
But that's just, it's not like a big deal in the movie, but they make a mention of the fact that Peter goes to Doctor Strange and he says, I thought you were the Sorcerer Supreme. And then Wong, and then they say, no, it's actually Wong now because Strange was gone for 5 years. So they had to pick someone else.
That's amazing.
But so he's the Sorcerer Supreme, and I love that they brought back the Abomination from the Incredible Hulk as well, and gave him a bit more of a comics accurate look.
That was a deep cut. I mean, Incredible Hulk. I don't think I've even seen that one. I actually had to do some research on the character because I wrote an article for CBR about.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that was and I
Yeah.
think they actually brought back Tim Roth to do the motion capture for
Right.
that. So
Yeah.
I mean, good on him for coming back just for a non-speaking role and just do the motion capture.
Right? Yeah. I like
Um,
this little rapport they have between Wong and the Abomination.
yes,
like,
yeah.
Student of Wong or something.
And he does that. And he does that thing where he's like, next time we got to work on your punches.
Yeah.
And I know I didn't notice it the first time, but this time I was paying attention to the portal he opened when he takes Abomination back, and it looked like he was taking him back to prison. So it's like this is like some sort of like prisoner work release or something.
Oh, okay. I didn't notice that.
Yeah, if you look very closely, because yeah, I didn't notice it either, but this time, because this is like the third or fourth time I've seen this movie, so this time I'm paying very close attention to things I didn't notice before, and I look in the portal, and I think I see like the outlines of some cells.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, because he should be still in jail after.
He should be, yeah. So yeah, it'd be kind of irresponsible if Wong's hanging out with this wanted criminal who broke free of prison.
Right. Yeah, it makes more sense that he's kind of taken him under his wing.
Yeah. And let's talk a little bit about Simu Liu as Shang-Chi, as the main character here. Now when they had announced that he was cast, like that's when I started looking into him, and because of that, I just by coincidence, Kim's Convenience had just come on Netflix at like shortly before they had announced this. So right away I started watching Kim's Convenience to see what he was like, and I just fell in love with that show.
Yeah. I have some conflicted feelings about that show, and I'm sure you've heard the discussions that have been happening since it kind of crashed and burned. And I really wanted to love it, and things about it that I loved the cast. I loved the concept and like where it had come from, like the original play. But as I think most people know now, like it became pretty clear that the writer's room was not very diverse, and that they weren't representing the authentic experience, and they weren't listening to the cast who of that identity. Like you would think that their input would be somewhat valuable at least. So, and I was watching all of this happen also like through Simu Liu's posts in the Subtle Asian Traits Facebook group. I don't know if you're familiar with that group.
No, I never heard of that.
Yeah, it's called Subtle Asian Traits. It's a huge group. I mean, hundreds of thousands of members, and like every Asian kid that I know is in that group. It's kind of become like this unofficial hub for us to talk about our experiences and our identity. And yeah, Simu started posting in the group pretty frankly and openly about what he was going through with Kim's Convenience and with other aspects of just trying to build his career. So just seeing him like having a really rough time, and him and the rest of the cast having a rough time on the Kim's Convenience set, and then like moving on to Shang-Chi, and how much that project has been for him.
Yeah,
really great. Like,
and Jean Yoon, who played the mother on Kim's Convenience, she co-signed a lot of what he had said, and and someone who did have those experiences, who literally is a Korean Canadian woman.
yeah, and apparently got completely just blown off whenever she tried to contribute.
Yeah,
which is just a shame.
And especially weird that they decided to do a spin-off with the only white character in the show.
Don't get me started. Like, I don't understand the logic behind that at all. Like, she's not even that interesting of a character. Sorry.
No, I mean, she was, Nicole Powell was good in that role, but yeah, it's very much just a supporting character. She's not strong enough to anchor her own show, so I'm not sure.
Not at all.
Yeah,
I would have thought Kimchi would have been the character that they would run.
Yeah, Kimchi would have been much more interesting as a spinoff. But especially especially when they had done more with his character as the show progressed, and he had became he started becoming more mature. That would have been I think there was definitely a lot more stuff to explore with him. But anyway, then yeah, you're right. Those are definitely lots of issues about it. But coming at it from someone who doesn't have that background, I really enjoyed what the show for what it was, and I thought the cast was great in it, especially Liu. I really loved his performance in it. And I love how they had kind of a little nod to the show. I'm not sure if maybe it was just me looking too much into it, but they're always commenting in the show about how he's walking around without a shirt on or that kind of stuff. And the scene where Ronnie Chang makes Shang-Chi take his shirt off, and then he walks out into the arena, and Katie's like, "What happened to your shirt?" And he's like, "I don't know."
It disappeared. That just happens. Yeah, that was great. Yeah, and yeah, Simu Liu is a great like everyman vibe that he has, and while also being like ripped and awesome. Like they really like struck gold there with finding him, and he actually like pretty actively campaigned for the role. I mean, like he was kind of joking and like on Twitter about it, but like it was kind of like, I'm kidding, but also I'm like not kidding,
yeah.
And it's just really cool to see how that all worked out. Apparently he auditioned once, and then they weren't sure, and they were like looking at a few other people, and they still just kept going back to him. So he then auditioned again, and they were like, yeah, this is the guy. And he had like amazing chemistry with Awkwafina, which like that definitely carried through in the movie. The two of them are just a really great match. Like they feel like real friends.
I mean, like you said, Simu Liu is just such he's got such a warm personality in general. I think it'd be impossible to find someone that he doesn't have chemistry with.
Yeah, that's true. I can agree with that.
And probably Awkwafina as well. I get that same kind of vibe from her with the stuff I've seen her in too.
Yeah, they're just like both really, really chill. Like, feel very authentic and very like fun to like someone you could hang out with in real life.
Yeah, and I really like because Shang-Chi in the comics is very much the stereotypical silent kung fu warrior type of thing, right? Very much the speaking in proverbs, all that kind of stuff.
Oh my God.
Very like self-serious and humble and all that kind of stuff. And so I'm really glad that they went away from that in this, and they had Simu kind of create a new personality for Shang-Chi, much like Robert Downey Jr. did for Tony Stark.
Right. Yeah. Like Shang-Chi in the movie is he just feels so real, like his confidence, his inadequacies, or like his like when Xialing is like kicking his ass and like reason with her, and like I've seen that dynamic play out so many times with brothers and sisters and like strong women in my family. I loved how human he felt. He just and like updating him for the modern age, for our time. He definitely feels like a teenager or like a young adult of our time.
Yeah.
While also having that like dark past and like kind of being like aware of how like weird it is that he has that past, and how like it doesn't really like jibe with like the personality that Katie knows of his. And, I really loved how they updated the character.
And I love that they show that you mentioned those two sides, and I really like that. One of the great things about the scene on the bus, and we'll get to talking about that because it's so amazing in so many ways.
Oh God, I love that scene.
But one of the great things about that is when Katie's reaction to all of that, because and how Simu plays that scene, right? How he plays it at one moment, like being being Sean and SF Sean, and then in the next moment, like you can almost see like this transformation where he becomes Shang-Chi again.
Yes.
Like, even like his facial feature, he's even like his what he's doing with his face. It's like it's much more tense, much less relaxed.
Yeah, and like his whole demeanor changes.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought that was amazingly well done.
Yeah, absolutely. It was kind of an interesting twist on the like, you're a superhero, like, like you're like what? Like, I really liked that she has her own deep history with him. Like been by his side for half of his life,
Right,
And
especially when she's like, he can't do anything because she's the
Yeah.
girl who saved him from getting beat up as a kid, and
that's right. That's
and the
Hotel
whole time
California.
not knowing that he could have actually kicked the guy's ass.
Yeah. Oh my God, that scene though, I can't get over that scene. It's an epic, like stakes constantly rising, like just it's already high from the beginning, and then somehow they still find a way to ratchet the stakes up like more and more. Just like the fact that it's a bus with people on it, and like all the extras did such an amazing job. Like they really just real people. And I've ridden the Muni in SF like a bunch of times, and it already feels really dangerous just riding the Muni normally. So seeing this kind of like heightened fantasy version of like a Muni fight was really funny on like a meta level, and just like amazing on the technical level.
That kind of reminds me of a brief digression, but it kind of reminds me of the scene in Homecoming when you were talking about that. Reminds me of that scene in Homecoming when Peter's finds out that Michael Keaton is the Vulture, and then the horror of that scene, right? Meeting your girlfriend's dad, and then and this being an MCU version where meeting your girlfriend's dad who's a supervillain. Whereas in this one, riding the bus is scary. Riding the bus is scary because you've got a guy with a razor for a fist coming at you.
Yeah.
So I like the way that when the MCU does that, where they find like real world connections to kind of lead you into these situations.
Yeah, totally. Peter Parker is such a great example of that, because a teenager, and he's going through all these typical teenager problems, but they're heightened because he's and
so I also want to talk about Xialing, because this is another character who she wasn't necessarily in the comics. Like there was because in the comics Shang-Chi actually has like numerous siblings, because Fu Manchu got around, and and one of them was Follow C, who was originally from the Fu Manchu novels, and they eventually changed her name to Zheng Baoyu. And she's very a lot of stuff comes from that character, like the whole idea of like forming her own kind of underground empire, and like that kind of stuff, very similar to it. And but she's very much kind of her own character. And one of the things I thought was really interesting in this, and I think you were the one who had posted the article that I found out about this, was originally they had talked about putting a red streak in her hair, and then she had that removed because there's this, it's like almost become a stereotype of a rebellious Asian girl.
Yes. I mean, you look back at like Pacific Rim, Kikuchi, she's got the blue streak.
Right.
Yeah, it's totally like a new stereotype.
Or like Rila Fukushima in the Wolverine with the red hair.
It's like a lazy like shortcut, not actually giving the character a personality. Just being like, she's rebellious, like she's cool, she's badass. She's not some China doll, like porcelain doll, but like giving any real content beyond that. And I loved seeing that article, because that really shows like the dedication that the creative team had to, oh, excuse me, I'm sorry, my phone's going off.
No problem.
Sorry. Okay, sorry. That really shows the dedication that they had to allowing like all the voices to contribute, because the actress brought that up, I think after a month of filming. So a month's worth of footage of Xialing with the red streak. And after she saw a Teen Vogue article about it, which killing it, by the way.
I remember when Trump first came into office, and there were all these Teen Vogue articles that were being talked about. It's like, I remember there were like tweets and stuff being like, I did not expect Teen Vogue and the Parks Department to be leading the revolution.
But here we are, and I love it. She saw that article and she was like, hey, like, can we not do this? Because I don't want to contribute to this trend that's been solidifying in Hollywood. And you know, all credit to them. They were like, yeah, no problem. So they went back and they used special effects to take out the red streak. And I just love Xiaoling's character. Like, she feels very, I've said this a million times, but she feels really real. Like, just like that one line where she's like, I kept my head down and I just, like, he didn't notice me and that's how I survived. Like, about her dad. That is such a real experience that so many young women in Asian cultures have been through, where you know, we're safe in our roles, and any deviation or standing out is dangerous.
Right.
Yeah. And
especially in some of the more restrictive countries as well, because you see that. Yeah. I mean, and even Japan being a much freer country than some other countries in Asia, you still see that attitude being perpetuated. So yeah, I thought that was a really interesting point you made. Something else I loved about her too, and I want to make sure to credit her name. Please tell me if I'm mispronouncing this, but Menger Zhang. Zhang. Okay, thank you. And amazing that she, going back to the hair thing. I mean, I think it's great that she felt, because this is her first film role.
Yes,
and
yes.
You know, having the courage to stand up in your first film role and say, hey, we shouldn't do it this way. I mean, and on such a huge production too. I'm like, you got to imagine that's intimidating. And most people,
all props to her. Yeah, absolutely.
Most people would probably have said, you know what, I'm just gonna, like you said, keep my head down. I'm just not gonna rock the boat. But she, and also I think, you know, some credit to the filmmakers that they'd created an environment where she felt comfortable enough to.
Yes. Absolutely. I love that this was such a like led with love. You know, like Daniel Destin Cretton, the director, he and Dave Callahan, the screenwriter, they really, like you say, they created this environment where all voices were heard and voices were encouraged to contribute. And the crew, from what I've heard, was all different flavors of Asian, like Japanese, Korean, like all of them. And you can really see how the love and the real life experiences of all these people were influences in the final. Yeah.
And something else I want to mention here. I also want to talk a little bit about, just very briefly, about Florian Montano. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, but Razor Fist. This is a character who's from the comic books, and the main difference is that both his hands have machetes instead of just one. And they don't retract, so he's just got them all the time, which imagine has got to make some aspects of life very difficult. But it was a character that, you know, you'd never expect to see that, and then just seeing this guy walk up, this, like, you know, big Romanian guy, and just boom, the machete pops right out. And
I love it.
It was just, he was so great, and just like he has like relatively small role, but he was just so awesome in the time he appears, and just like the fact that it's his car that they steal.
I know, oh my god. And Katie being super excited about it, like, I like this guy.
And how he joins up with the end, he's like, nope, we should work together.
Yeah. Seeing him by Xialing's side in that post-credit scene, exciting. I can't wait to see what's next for Xialing.
I love the fact that she's taking control of the 10 rings.
Oh yeah, it's great. And they've added some really interesting complexity there with her lying to Shang-Chi about shutting it down, and then like being like, nah, I'm gonna reform it in my image, which is
the fact that even though she's the leader of the 10 rings, Shang-Chi actually has the ring. So you got to imagine that sets up potential for conflict in the next film.
Yeah. I hope they do like a TV series or something with her. Like,
well, that's what I was wondering, because they said at the end the 10 rings will return, not Shang-Chi will return. So
yes,
it made me think that would be pretty cool if they did like a TV show with her rebuilding the organization.
Yeah.
And because also I noted, because again, I'm paying more attention on the fourth viewing, but the people who are sitting right in front of her, they're like passing photos back and forth of like, so I imagine that's like potential candidates for the organization. So
Right.
we could bring in like new versions of some of the other characters from either the Master of Kung Fu mythos or some of the, or just, you know, some of the other characters who haven't appeared yet in the MCU could possibly get wrapped up in that.
Yeah, that's really exciting. Like it makes me want to like look into the source material a little bit more, although I'm a little afraid because
I mean, it's like when you're watching something like Kill Bill or something like that, you got to understand that you got to understand the time period it's in, and it's, if you can look past that, which I know it can be difficult, they've got some epic collections of Master of Kung Fu, and the Doug Moink, Paul Galassi stuff especially is pretty damn good, and it's pretty good. Like if you like, you know, Kung Fu movies, then you'll probably appreciate it a little bit more, as opposed to if you're coming without that background.
Yeah, I'm definitely interested in checking them out. I'd like to know more about Razor Fist in general. Like I don't really have any kind of like idea of why he's in the Ten Rings, or like why he's so dedicated to Wenwu. Like there's that one line where he's like, "You and your sister deserve everything that's coming."
Yeah.
And I think that's really interesting because there's like a very personal kind of vitriol behind that one.
Yeah, you're right. It's very interesting. There wasn't really anything very special. I mean, he was I'm just doing I think he was just a guy who was working with for Fu Manchu, basically. Is how it worked there. But I don't think he'd ever had like any sort of, you know, he's one of these characters one of these supervillains in the comic books who just kind of appears for the fight scenes, but he doesn't really have any larger backstory or anything like that. He's just basically a glorified henchman.
Right. So they've got interesting directions they could go with him.
Yeah. Especially because the fact that he's remaining loyal to the organization despite what he said about that. So that's an interesting turnaround, that he ended up respecting Xialing and like just kind of being folded into her new version of the organization. Yeah.
Very exciting.
One of the things that was a little bit disappointing was the Death Dealer, the masked guy, because he's got such a presence on screen, and he's got that fight with Shang-Chi in Macau, and it was so good, and then just to see him taken out so quickly in the end like that was kind of a disappointment.
Yeah, I think they were trying to do that thing where they're like, this guy's so strong, he's so strong, and the bad guys are even scarier. Like, they got rid of him in a second, which I totally get, but like, yeah, he felt a bit wasted. And he doesn't ever speak, does he?
No, he doesn't, and it's surprising because he's a really big presence in Shang-Chi in the comic books. So because he's
really?
He was like he was working with MI6 at first, and then he ended up betraying them to Shang-Chi's father. So, and then after that, Fu Manchu gave him the Death Dealer persona. So he's got this very personal relationship with Shang in the comics, which they kind of touch on a little bit with the whole fact that he was the guy who trained him. But I wish we could have seen more of that.
I thought there was going to be the first time I watched the movie, I thought there was going to be some kind of twist of like, he's like Wenwu's brother, or you know, like his or another son that he had. I mean, Wenwu lived for like thousands and thousands of years. It's kind of like amazing that he never had any other kids.
Well, I think that's one of the things that, you know, the door leaves open, because the fact that he's been around for all this time. I mean, they've said that Genghis Khan is like a third of the world or something like that is descended from him.
Right. Yeah.
And you got to imagine, and especially because they hint at him being Genghis Khan, because one of the names he used to go by was Master Khan.
That's right.
So there is that possibility, and the fact that in the comic books, you know, the character had a bunch of kids. So
right. Yeah.
So yeah, there's that definite possibility, but this is just the first with blanking on her name right now, but the actress, the woman who his mother, that was the first time that he had actually fallen in love, right?
With Ying Li.
Thank you.
Like that, they definitely like were like depicting it as like his first true love, and the one that he like felt it was worth it to grow old for.
And I thought that was because that was one of the things that was kind of bugging me throughout most of the movie is the fact, like, why would she be with this guy? Like,
I was thinking the same thing.
And then when you see how he changed and everything, and I'm like, oh, now I get it. And then it seems so ludicrous on paper, right?
Yeah.
But and a lot of it goes back to Tony Leung's acting, because he totally sells that.
Yes, absolutely. And it's like the movie magic of like making something pretty ridiculous actually feel really like emotionally affecting and very, very real. And I really loved the warmth in their family scenes, like when they're playing DDR.
Yeah.
Just cuddling together. And I think they did a really good job with like the dead mom trope in this one, because she felt complicated. She felt real. You could feel that loss, like how the magnitude of that loss, and why it's been so devastating for each of the members of the family.
Yeah.
Having this guiding and this balancing force in their life like ripped away in such a devastating way.
Right. And how that has affected them, and especially how that affects Wenwu, where the point where, because you get the sense that he wasn't always the kind of like the domineering father type of thing. And like when Xialing says, like, after my mom died, then he changed, and Tony Leung really does a good job of selling that. And and that's one of the things that makes it different from the comics, because in the comic books, his father, there's no like lost love between Shang-Chi and his father, because his father's a total bastard.
Right.
But here you get that sense of they feel like they've lost a good father.
Yeah.
And I think that was really well done.
Absolutely. And like, I really love kind of a parallel for intergenerational trauma, and like a lot of like me, our parents went through hard things when they had to leave their countries, or their parents went through hard things, and that has kind of echoed and twisted relationships all down the line. And, there's like a double there of like, you lost their mom, and then like you say, they lost their dad too. They lost who he was. And that and in returning to his warlord, like abusive, domineering personality, he also lost his relationship with his children. There's still that love there, like there's still that deep love and connection. Like when they reunite in Macau, the first thing that when Shang-Chi do is touch foreheads.
Yeah.
And like you can see like the pain and like the conflict between them, but also like the very real and love and yearning. And I was very emotionally affected by that. I thought that was really beautifully done. And again, Tony Leung is incredible.
Yeah, especially in that scene at the end when Shang-Chi tells him, your family needs you, Dad. And just like that, that very, that, and it's like him still trying to reach out, and how at the end he does kind of succeed. Right.
Yes.
It's like a second too late, but he does succeed in the end.
Yeah.
And then the way that he just kind of like, he lets the rings fall off his arms and lets them pass over to Shang. I thought that was also a really good symbolic way of showing that, he has changed in his last moments.
Yeah. It's a beautiful story. It really is. Like, all the different layers of the movie are just so well done. Like, there's no corner of this like narrative they didn't like pour love into Lore, and I was just really impressed by that.
Yeah. There was one thing that for me was a little bit on rewatching this movie. Like, I loved the scene the first time I watched it, but rewatching it the third act kind of slows for me a little bit during the big
dragony stuff.
Yeah. It's and like and like the more I watch it, and the more I watch Tony Leung and Simu Liu, it's like I wanted the third act to be much more about them and just them, as opposed to a big, which it's become a Marvel trope now, and which is kind of disappointing. I'm kind of over the big, battlefield scenes at the end with all these nameless characters fighting each other.
Yeah, totally. I think a lot of people felt that way. I remember a lot of the discussion, people were making points about that. Just how like the more personal stakes kind of disappear.
Mm-hmm.
The movie kind of reaches its climax, and it just becomes about these big CG like worms.
Yeah.
In the air. It's tough because like that's the name of the game with Marvel, right? Like they need to connect everything back to their big multiverse and the cosmic level events that are happening. And it's just I don't really know what the answer is, because that big structure is what makes incredible projects like this possible, because they have the money and they have the cultural and financial backing, but to be able to create an amazing work of art like this, but then they still have to like pay the piper, like, you know, make it connect back, make it have the same scale as the other movies do. So
I think Spider-Man No Way Home had kind of found a way to do that. So I'm not going to say anything more about that climactic scene, but when you see it, I think you'll understand what I'm saying.
Okay, I'm very excited to see No Way Home. I hear it's really good.
It's definitely like I did a ranking the other day because I had seen all the movies I was probably going to see in 2021 finally. Now that I finally saw No Time to Die and Venom, and so I did a ranking of all the movies, and yeah, Spider-Man No Way Home was definitely like the top of my list.
Okay, that's high praise.
Yeah, so,
I'm very excited.
Yeah, and is there anything else you wanted to mention about this movie? Anything that we didn't kind of touch on?
Let me think. Just I did kind of touch on it already, but like I really liked the feeling or like the discussion of the Asian American kids, like mental and emotional burden, and like how they kind of dissected that with the scenes with the friends in the bar. Sue, I think, is the friend's name.
Yeah,
it's like you need to grow up, like you need to like face your or fulfill your potential, and that just felt really real. Like I've had so many conversations like that where it's like, you're so smart, and like, why aren't you doing this, and my parents want me to do this, and I don't know what I want, and yeah, I really loved that. And I loved how they brought it home again at the end of the movie with Katie like telling them what happened, and then being like, are you joking me? Like, are you pulling my leg? It was just a great like bookend to the film. Like the film had great structure overall.
Yeah,
like the like they have to do some pretty crazy transitions between worlds and settings and tones. I feel like they just nailed like bringing it home at the end and like keeping it about Shang-Chi's like personal life and journey and his friends. Yeah,
I also thought I did love that scene, especially when Wong comes through at the end and he just takes her drink.
Oh my god, so great. Wong was like the unspoken MVP of this movie.
Yeah, just him belting out Hotel California at the end.
Oh my god, I loved it.
There's also like bringing it back to the universe connections here. I do love that we're kind of hinting at other stuff happening with the rings, and because one of the things when they had that dragon first appear, my first thought was, I'm not sure if you know from the comic books, but Fin Fang Foom is like this big dragon character in the comic books.
I heard something about that. Yeah.
And so that's what I thought it was at first. And then I'm like, wait, no. That's not him. And then but there's a similarity there. And then you've got the beacon at the end. So in the comics, the Mandarin's rings are connected to Fin Fang Foom's planet, I believe. So,
okay.
So there might be some connection there that they're building to later on. So I thought that was kind of cool. It was also really cool seeing Brie Larson and Mark Ruffalo pop up again.
Oh yeah, that was fun. Yeah, I'm a big Captain Marvel fan, so I was just really excited to see.
Yeah, especially Bruce just going like, yeah, I don't really have her number. She just does this all the time.
Yeah, it was great. Yeah, it's exciting to think about where they could go next, and maybe they could bring the world of Ta Lo back. I'm really to explore that dimension more, because Michelle Yeoh does that kind of exposition dump about halfway through the movie. She's like showing them the mural, and she says something really interesting, which is that they have cities and they have like a thriving, vibrant culture. I'm not sure how much is still there after what happened with the Dweller in Darkness, but I gotta imagine that there's more people out there in Talo, like beyond their just little village.
Yeah, that's something I was wondering about too, and I wonder if maybe it's in the same dimension that Kunlun is in from Iron Fist.
Oh, I'm not familiar.
Because I won't say anything else, but they recently something happened where they're. Well, have you seen Hawkeye?
No, I have not.
Okay, so something happens, and they're basically confirming that the Netflix stuff exists in the MCU. So there's some stuff in Hawkeye.
That's
there's some stuff in No Way Home that you'll know when you see it.
Okay.
And so those shows exist in the MCU now, pretty much. So that couldn't. And so like my entire time when I'm watching the Talo stuff, I'm thinking like, this sounds very similar to the Kunlun stuff, like the whole difficulty getting to it and all that, and the path only opens once a year. Kunlun's like the exact same thing. So I'm wondering if they're like in the same dimension, if they're linked somehow.
Yeah, there's like so much more ground they could cover there.
Yeah.
And very open possibilities. I'd love Michelle Yeoh's character come back. She was seriously awesome.
And this is her second MCU appearance, actually, because she was she was in Guardians 2 as one of the original Ravagers.
That's right. A very brief appearance, right?
Very brief appearance, yeah. Like her and Ving Rhames was also in there too. And which that at one point after Guardians 2, there's some briefly rumors that they might be trying to do something with those characters. Which would be cool to see her doing that too. I mean, you get more Michelle Yeoh, it's always a good thing.
I was gonna say, like, I'm always down for more Michelle Yeoh.
Yeah.
It's kind of funny how they've had like a few different instances of trying out like Asian actors in the MCU and then like having them come back in a bigger role. Like Gemma recently.
I'm sorry, say it again.
Gemma Chan.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, because she was in Captain Marvel, right? And she had a small role in that. And then she came back as Cersei in Eternals. Just love seeing more Asian faces, and I'm totally fine with them double playing roles. Like, just give us more awesome Asian ladies.
And especially, I love Gemma Chan after I saw her in Crazy Rich Asians, and then seeing her in. So it was really nice seeing her in Captain Marvel, but like you said, it was a very kind of small role. She didn't really have a whole lot to do. And then I just watched Eternals like a week ago or something, and it was okay, but I thought she was especially really good in it, and especially the possibilities it opens up for her, because in the comics, Cersei becomes an Avenger.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And also they had and Dane becomes the Black Knight, and they have a relationship in the comics. So they're hinting at that kind of stuff. And especially this is a brief digression, but at the end of Eternals, you'd see the post-credit scene.
Yes.
So do you know who that guy is who's talking to Dane?
I read something about this. But tell me who it is. Who was it again?
It's Blade.
Okay, right.
Yeah, because it's Mahershala Ali.
Mahershala Ali, yes.
Who's another guy they're bringing back from something else in the MCU, because he was.
Wow, they're really going back and like bringing back all the deep cuts. And
I mean, good for them, because I love this, and it reminds me of what they did in Crisis with Brandon Routh, how they have him as Superman and him as the Atom, and it's just coincidental they look exactly alike.
Right.
Another thing I just wanted to touch on regards to the universe stuff is I really liked how, because when people look at the MCU, they think it's like one big master plan and everything is carefully planned out, but it's really not. Like they have like a vague idea of where they're going, but how they get there is kind of up in the air. And I think Shang-Chi is the most obvious example of that, where you can see this was not the intention with the Mandarin and all that stuff from the beginning, but the way they work it in seamlessly, and the whole fact that when you do the math in this movie, like Shang-Chi goes off at the age of 14, and then he comes back, he's like 25 in this movie, 26, something like that.
Yeah, something like that.
You do the math actually works out from Iron Man 3, because you've got that 5-year gap from Endgame. And so the math actually works out that and it makes sense why his father was like, we'll rebuild the 10 rings, as in, taking it back from what they had done to in Iron Man 3. So all of that math actually really works out really well. And I thought that was a, really, really good writing and really good way to find a way to make all this stuff fit together.
Yeah, it's amazing how it fell into place so perfectly.
Mm-hmm.
And I really like how the MCU is kind of emulating its source medium, in the sense that there's this overarching multiverse and kind of just fantastical universe of heroes, and all these different creators are being brought in to give their own spin, to do their own run, to do their own movie. And when you think of it that way, I just get really excited, because like I just want to see, more voices, more different spins on these stories. Like Black Panther was amazing, and definitely like a blueprint for how the Shang-Chi project materialized.
Exactly. Yeah, I don't think you get to Shang-Chi and the way it's done without Black Panther.
Absolutely. Yeah. And not an MCU movie, but Crazy Rich Asians, which
I was thinking the same thing too.
Yeah, is totally like a stepping stone to Shang-Chi. I mean, obviously Aquafina's in both of them. On a more broad level, like the depiction in Crazy Rich Asians of Asian youth, and it being more authentic and more grounded, while also still being, having elements of fantasy and of movie magic. It's really exciting to see these frontiers being pushed. And
when you're talking about the ABC thing, that Crazy Rich Asians popped right into my mind. That conversation with their mom at the beginning. It's like, your face is Chinese, but your heart and your mind are American.
Yes, very much related to that. Yeah, definitely brought some of that discussion and that dynamic into.
Okay, so Jessica, any final things you want to mention before we close up?
I think we covered a lot of ground already. I love the movie. I'm really, really excited for where they're going to take these characters next. Please bring back Michelle Yeoh. We love and I hope that Katie and Shang-Chi don't get together. I like friends, like you said. And I'd like to see Katie continue to grow in her own space, in her own right.
Yeah.
Maybe something, I don't know. I think it's weird that she's an archer and like Hawkeye's also an archer, and like now we've got Kate Bishop, and like it's kind of like a bit too much of an overlap. So if we could like see her kind of grow in some other direction, but I think it's a good start. It's a good start.
I also wanted to briefly mention, because I was talking about the Shang-Chi comic book, the current one, the ongoing series now, it's being written by Gene Luen Yang, and so he's Asian American.
Right.
So I'd read the first book of that, and it was really good. And apparently that was a mini series, but he's doing the ongoing series now apparently too. So
I'll have to check it out.
Yeah, definitely check it out. It was really good. And in the ongoing series, it just started like this last year, it looks like. It's already looks like it's up to 9 issues so far. So it looks like it's still going. And that one, I think that's when he starts going through and clarifies the stuff about his mother and all that.
Okay.
So yeah.
There was one more thing I wanted to talk about.
Okay.
The music in the movie. So good. Are you familiar with 88 Rising?
No.
So they're like an international, like Asian youth-led group record label.
Okay.
It was just really exciting that they did the whole they made a whole album for the movie. Have you
Sorry, say it again. You faded out real quick.
Oh yeah, sorry. They made a whole album for the movie, and so all of the songs that play in the movie are from this 88 Rising Shang-Chi album.
Oh, okay.
It's totally like worth a listen. All the songs are really good, and they got some really exciting like young Asian artists on it. Nikki is a singer who's worked with 88 Rising, and she's Indonesian. I might be wrong about that, but she's an amazing vocalist. Janae Aiko, who is a big star here in America. She does a track on the album, and also BB. BB is a Korean hip hop artist. BIBI, definitely check out her work. She's amazing. It's just really cool seeing this like young Asian energy and like pop culture being put at the forefront and like kind of shaping the sound of this movie. Just yeah, like I was really, really impressed and excited by that. And I definitely recommend the album. It's full of bops.
Something else I noticed too is there's a lot of hip hop used in the music, and
Yes.
If I'm not, correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't hip hop like become something really big in Asian American community? And
It absolutely has. Yeah. Both like here and across the pond in Asia. And I do wonder about like the cultural like appropriation aspect of that. Because you know it is a Black genre. Like we're like taking our inspiration from Black artists and Black music, but it has been really fascinating seeing how that kind of like language of rebellion and of self-expression has become a new outlet for young Asian people, to talk about the experiences that we have now. And
I mean, I think that's the line between like, is it cultural appropriation or is it influence? Is like, you know, are you honoring what came before type of thing?
Yes. Yeah. And in general, I think 88 Rising does an amazing job with that. Like, and they've kind of created their own space of Asian hip hop that really, really fascinating. So yeah, highly recommend the album. It's great. And the feeling of the movie is very unique because of the music. Like the hip hop track that plays like during the bus scene, like it feels so San Francisco, like it feels so Bay. Like that's the music that we blast as we're like driving around in the Bay. And yeah, so it was perfect.
So yeah, this was a really interesting conversation. Thank you so much for coming on, and you know,
thank you for having me.
Yeah, because like I you know, seen a little bit of what you're talking about in like different articles and stuff like that, but you know, you also talked about a lot of stuff that I hadn't even heard about. So I thought all this was very fascinating.
Well, great. I'm so glad it worked out.
Yeah. So I don't know. Now, do you want to promote anything before we wrap up?
Oh, well, check out CBR. We are putting out articles on the daily about everything nerdy and geeky. And yeah. My Twitter is oh God, what is my Twitter? I post on there, but I need to promote it more. Let's see. My Twitter is also linked in my author bio on CBR.
Okay, so yeah, so just look for Jessica Fong on CBR.
Yeah, look for Jessica Fong on CBR, and I'll be there. Yep.
Okay, great. Well, thanks again for coming on, and this is your podcast debut, if I'm not mistaken, right?
It is, yeah.
So how did it feel?
It was actually not as scary as I was afraid it was going to be. I was very nervous, as you know, coming in.
Yeah, so good, yeah. So we'll have to have you come back on at some point in the future then.
Oh, I would love that. Thank you so much.
All right, so that does it for this episode of Superhero Cinephiles. Thanks so much for listening. You can head over to superherocinephiles.com is the website. You can find us on Twitter and Instagram at SuperCinemaPod, and please make sure to like and review us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. And that does it for this episode. We will talk to you next time. Bye for now. You have been listening to the Superhero Cinephiles podcast. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram at SuperCinemaPod. Join our Facebook group by searching for Superhero Cinephiles, where you can interact with us and other superhero fans. If you'd like to support the show, you can become a regular supporter at Patreon or make a one-time donation through PayPal, both of which can be found at our website, superherocinephiles.com. If you buy or rent any movies through the Amazon links at our site, it helps support the show. Please be sure to rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts.
Thank you for listening. And as always, good night, good evening. God bless.